Great. Okay, thank you. All right, so let's get started then. Um, Hello, everybody. I don't think that I see any names yet that I don't recognize, but just to ensure that I introduce myself, Katie Kidd-Wright, I'm the director of GFAN, and I would ask if my colleagues and teammates at the GFAN Secretariat are able to put on their videos if they don't already have them on so we can say hello to the team. We're excited today to be bringing you this call and this launch of our new strategy. And we're really glad to have a number of colleagues and members who are joining us today to share their perspectives. So without further ado, we're just going to get underway. So if I could have the next slide. Our agenda today is very simple. As I sort of just said, we wanted to take an opportunity to share with you all our new strategy. It's to get us through to 2030, even through these changeable and interesting times in global health conversations. But we are excited to bring it to you and think that we've managed to come up with something that both makes sense for the moment and also allows us to meet the challenges that we'll undoubtedly face as we go forward. But as part of today, we wanted you to hear a little bit from us, from me, in terms of sharing with you what the strategy is. But we also wanted to ask some of you, some of our members, to share their reflections and perspectives around our strategy. So that is the whole sort of structure of today's call. And then we will have an opportunity for discussions and questions towards the end of the call. So hopefully lots of time to hear from us so that you understand our new strategy and where we think we're headed, and then hear from a number of our members and partners who are here to speak to you and give some of their perspectives today, as well as have a little bit of time for discussion. So I don't think we have a drum roll, but perhaps we could have the next slide. So we're really excited to bring to you all our new strategy. I don't have to tell any of you what the sort of challenging broader context that we are bringing this to you within. The investment case for the eighth replenishment had an ambitious ask in it of at least 18 billion for the next round of global fund implementation, and we fell 5 and a bit billion below what was needed as the minimum. And we've seen that trend across other global health investment opportunities, even though it is positive that the Global Fund was able to raise over 12 billion in the environment we found ourselves in. It's indicative of this sort of the broader context that is not just about declining investment in global health, which I'd say we've seen before, but it's also very active, and I would say most of the time, there's very prescient and justified criticisms right now of the overall shape and approach of global health institutions. So that conversation is fairly live. And so in some ways, it was a really great time to be rethinking our strategy and approach to our work. In others, it was a little bit like, like we were trying to tell the future with a fortune teller and read the tea leaves in our tea mugs to come up with a strategy that made sense in the moment, but that also is fit for purpose over the coming years, especially when those coming years look like a lot of change, as well as, potentially reform. So what I would say to that is, while that felt challenging at times, I would say we've been fairly used to defining our strategies in slightly complicated contexts. Our last strategy that brought us up to the end of 2025 was actually first discussed at a meeting on March 6th of 2020, which was the second last day of our last in-person meeting for nearly 2 years. And as you all know, the context within which we operated in that sort of 2020 to 2025 changed quite a bit in early 2020. Which is similar to what happened in 2025. Our International Steering Committee had begun sort of early preparations in mid-2024 to the point where we were ready to launch our strategy process in January of 2025. And we all know what some of those conversations in the early part of last year ended up looking like. However, we kept going in terms of our strategy. We invited many of you to participate in surveys and conversations with 2 consultants who supported us in this work. And we began that sort of process of a number of sort of large and small discussions to further sort of refine and define the input that we had received. And I think that this has brought us to a place where we were able to sort of both refine our understanding of what your vision as our members is for GFAN. And so we are very pleased to launch our strategy today, which I think in a nutshell can be said to, it ensures that our core identity remains the same, but it has identified areas where we need to grow, where we need to intensify our work, and where we need to selectively expand our work. So we're very excited to bring that to you. So a first look here, and I'm sure my colleagues will be popping into the chat some of the links to some of this information that's now available online, but this shouldn't look too different. There, once again, in our new strategy, we have 3 pillars. Their names have changed, and I'll go through that a little bit later, but our vision and our mission and our values, you know, there is some updated language there to make sure that we're sort of meeting the moment that we find ourselves in, but it should still look and feel very much like what GFAN has felt like, or what we've aimed to do, and how we've aimed to do that in terms of ensuring that collaboration and advocacy is guided by you, our members, that we share your priorities, values, and that the lived expertise of colleagues and communities affected by the 3 diseases and affected by health challenges overall shape the way in which we work. And, you know, we hope for and work towards a world where all people can access quality healthcare and services to prevent and treat HIV, TB, and malaria, and can exercise their human rights, including the right to health. Our new pillars are unity, expertise, and advocacy. And hopefully those words sound, you know, resonate for you in a way and don't just sort of sound like words that we've kind of attached to some other ideas. So I wanted to share a little bit about each pillar that hopefully you can see how the work that we intend to do remains the same, but that also identifies for you some of the areas that we heard and believe that we need to expand the focus of our work in sort of broad, in, you know, sort of those broad strategic sense, but then also requires some subtle and some not so subtle ways in which we will shift sort of the operations of our work, as well as, you know, what you see from us in terms of, you know, outputs and tools and content. So our first pillar, unity, is intended to make sure that you all know that we remain committed to convening a global network that has a diversity of advocates through our regular calls, our global and regional convenings, and our collaborations with our regional partners and others. So you should hopefully continue to see all of that in the work that we do. What we hope you'll also see in terms of our expanded focus is that we want to try and strengthen, but also at times clarify our collaborations with external partners. So we've worked very closely with Global Fund delegations to the Global Fund board and our regional partners in Africa and Asia for many years now. But we want to make sure that we strengthen those relationships and make sure that those are clear to you all as our members. In addition to which, we also want to be reaching out to more and different sort of groups to bring in some of the expertise and lived experience that colleagues have shared with us would be helpful in our work. Some of that it will include being more intentional about our engagement with youth and emerging leaders in the work, but also understanding our membership better in order to engage with you all and retain our newer members, and ensure that we have a balance of expertise that is being shared through our platform. So we want to make sure you're not always hearing from the same people, including just ourselves, but that you're hearing from a good balance of expertise and knowledge that exists within the membership. And we want to make sure that we're expanding our work to grow our engagement with both other financing institutions and processes in the global health space. But that's because that's the space in which the Global Fund itself operates, and needs an enabling environment to be successful in its work. That's our first pillar. Our second pillar, expertise. For those of you who've had an opportunity to work with us over the last year or so, you'll know that this has been both a shift in terms, already been a bit of a shift in terms of how we talk about colleagues and what they bring to the conversation and what they can bring to decision-making tables. But ultimately, our goal in identifying this pillar is to make sure that we remain a source of trusted and timely access to relevant policy information. So we want to continue to do that for you. What we also want to do is make sure that you understand a little bit more about GFAN and our role in, creating knowledge and providing analysis that helps you translate the complex developments that exist within our, sort of world of global health and the Global Fund into actionable advocacy and policy insights that you can use in your day-to-day work. We want to make sure there's a little bit more sustainability in how knowledge is generated and shared. Ensure that there's more consistent access and relevance across languages, regions, and partners. And that's important to us because we heard a lot about making sure that we are making this a more, or at least, a more accessible space, I guess, for especially for colleagues who may be newer to these conversations. So we did kind of start a little bit of that late last year with a webinar around sort of the basics around global fund processes in the context of replenishment to, grant making in the global fund. So we're going to continue to do that kind of thing. We want to continue to be to ensure that we're participating with our regional hubs and members in the forums and the conversations that are important to you so that we co-create based on those priorities, our action plans, our work plans that help you strengthen the connection between evidence, advocacy, and lived experience. And our final pillar, which it may come as a surprise that advocacy actually was not one of our previous pillars in terms of the language that we used. We used to call it amplify, but this really is the heart of our work, which is really about mobilizing the financial support for and advocating for civil society and communities' priorities at the Global Fund, which remains the core and the heart of our work, but also within sort of these other institutional spaces or process kind of spaces. So you're going to continue to see a lot of that work from us, but we are going to be selective, but we are going to be more proactively engaging in other discussions like the future of global health and global health reform discussions. As you've already seen from us for a little while, we're going to try and carry those lessons that we have been generating and learning from all of you around meaningful and inclusive governance from civil society and communities into discussions around new or revamped or reformed financing instruments as well as institutions, especially where they might risk duplicating or undermining the work of the Global Fund. And we want to try and uplift and seek out new network expertise to diversify resource mobilization focus beyond sort of the traditional kind of G7 donor mobilization. So in a nutshell, that is our new strategy. I do have two other slides that I'm only going to speak to, quite slowly, and then we'll, as colleagues are speaking, we'll sort of, go back through these slides so that you can continue to see this online. But we've also posted the link in the chat to our new strategy, which is online on our website. So please do go and check that out as I'm speaking. But I think for me, it is sometimes a little shocking to even remember for myself that I am not new actually anymore. It has been almost 14 years that I've been working with GFAN. It's not been quite as long as, the director, but I've been doing this work since the fall of 2012. And what we sought to do at the time to create and mobilize political and financial support for the Global Fund remains sort of at the heart of what we were going to do. So you don't have to fear that that's going to change in any kind of noticeable way, but we do want to defend the types of gains and the principles and the inclusiveness that, while imperfect, we do find in the Global Fund and in the spaces around the Global Fund quite a bit more than we do in some other spaces. So that's going to continue to be something that we want to do alongside, continuing to ask for the investments that are actually needed. And well, we have to have, we at times have to put on our realist hats and we have to, find the best that we can do with what we have. We also still have to ask for what's actually needed to make a difference in the work that we do in terms of investments and in terms of the types of people who should be sitting at the decision-making tables. So the next slide is also just another sort of general kinds of statements about what I tried to cover earlier in terms of where we're trying to intensify or clarify our work or even grow through our new strategy. So we do hope to be a bit more intentional and work towards more sustainability around how the knowledge that's shared in this network is generated and make sure that we're providing more consistent access and relevance, across our different partners, and be a little bit more conscious around how we engage and strengthen that connection between evidence, advocacy, and lived experience. So that's the strategy in a nutshell. I hope that you will be able to go and look at those documents. I am also going to take a moment here to thank Leslie Odendahl and Gisa Dang, who are on the call, who supported us through this process. Through most of 2025, if not all of 2025, if I'm not mistaken. I think we got underway very, very late in 2024 and right through December 2025 to get us to this stage, and just really appreciate the help that they gave us and the International Steering Committee in order to sort of come up with a strategy that makes sense and that we feel is something that gives us what we need to guide the work as we take it forward. So what we have done today, as I said, is invite a number of colleagues to join us. And on the next slide, you'll see some of those names and some of those faces. And I'm first going to turn it over to the co-chair, one of the co-chairs from our International Steering Committee and longtime friend of GFAN, Cecilia Sanu, for some of her sort of overarching remarks about the new strategy and about where she sees this going and how the steering committee sees the new strategy. So Cecilia, I'm going to pass it over to you. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning. Indeed, GFAN, we are really proud. We are happy because this is a day that we all look out for. The 2026-2030 strategy reflects who we are as a network, what we have built together, and what this moment asks for us. We are at a difficult moment for global health, but our mission remains unchanged: to bring together civil society and community voices to support a fully funded and effective global fund. But today's challenges require us to do more. After decades of progress against HIV, TB, and malaria, progress has slowed. Global health funding is shrinking. Space for civil society and communities is under pressure around the world, and we are all aware. We are seeing growing anti-rights movements and policies that threaten hard-won gains. And this is exactly why networks like GFAN matter and why we need to support this important strategy. With this new strategy, we'll continue to build on the expertise and partnerships we have developed over the years. We will work together to support new ways of cooperating. As the executive director said, advocating and financing global health that are rooted in equity, justice, and sustainability. Ultimately, this strategy prepares GFAN for a changing world, one where we protect progress, strengthen solidarity, and keep community leadership and lived experience at the center of global health. The years ahead will not be easy, and we are aware and we are seeing it. But we have faced difficult moments before. And every time we have moved forward, we have done so together. The International Steering Committee, our co-chair, Pelisa, and all of us are happy to have you, and we know you see this strategy as the pillar and beacon of hope for civil society and communities, and put in a lot of resources to support GFAN to continue this great work that they are doing. This is the time we need GFAN to stand behind communities and civil society and behind Global Fund to ensure that we have fully funded Global Fund to do the work that we have done and to protect the progress we have made. On behalf of the steering committee, International Steering Committee, and the Secretariat, all of us at GFAN, we are so grateful and we celebrate all of you and we thank you for being part of this. We look forward to mobilizing resources with you to implement this innovative and important strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cecilia. I also always love when you give me promotions and call me executive director when I'm just a director, but I always appreciate it. And I just thank you for your enthusiasm and your leadership over the last year and a half as we've been developing and operationalizing this strategy, and to all of the other ISC members who are on the call today or who were a part of that over the last while. So we have a very wonderful group of colleagues composed of all of you from our membership. And so thank you, Cecilia. I really appreciate that. I will pass it on at this stage to another ISC member, Rachel Ong, who's been the regional coordinator of GFAN Asia Pacific for a very long time, but we won't say how long, right, Rachel? And GFAN AP has been a strong partner for us over the years, and we really appreciate all the support that you've provided personally, Rachel, and your team over the years. You were part of the strategy development, and we just wanted to invite you today to reflect on your perspectives as a regional partner in our work around the new strategy. So thank you for joining us quite late in your day, as it always is when we're getting started at my side of the world, but it's lovely to see you, Rachel. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, and a good morning, afternoon, or evening to everybody. So it's a real privilege to speak today about what the Global Fund Advocates Network, GFAN, means to me. I mean, as a dinosaur from 2011, when GFAN was founded. Now, it's about reflecting how far we've come and to share my hopes as we enter this very next strategic chapter together, especially as Cecilia noted, it's such challenging times. Because at its core, GFAN represents something powerful yet simple, our collective voice. It is a space where our advocates from communities, civil society, across regions come together not just to speak, but to be heard, and more important, to influence change. So for me, GFAN is no more than a network, it is a family. It is a community rooted in solidarity and shared purpose, and bridges the gap between those most affected by HIV, TB, and malaria, and the global decisions that shape their lives. It reminds us that advocacy is strongest when it is coordinated, informed, and driven by lived realities. So GFAN has shown us over the years that when we align our voices across borders, we can shape funding priorities, influence political will, and ultimately save lives. One of the most striking achievements over the last years has been our ability to stay united while embracing diversity. And in this new strategy, we see that as well. We bring together advocates from different contexts with different priorities and create a shared agenda without losing the richness of those differences. We've seen that effective advocacy is not just about moments like replenishments, but about sustained engagement. It requires continuous learning, adaptation, and trust building. And most importantly, we've seen that impact comes when advocacy is grounded in evidence and community realities. GFAN has increasingly become a platform where data, experience, and strategy intersect. So as we move into this new strategic phase, as Katie pointed out, the three pillars, unity, expertise, and advocacy, are not just concepts, they are commitments. On unity, I'm encouraged by the vision of GFAN as a global family, connected but not centralized. The structure that brings together the Secretariat, GFAN Africa, and GFAN Asia Pacific, and we hope more partners from different regions, reflects maturity. It recognizes that leadership must be both shared and contextual. My hope is that this model deepens trust and clarity, where each part of the network and platform understands its role, builds on its strengths, and contributes to a collective impact that is greater than the sum of its parts. Unity in this sense is not about uniformity. It's about alignment with purpose. On expertise, I believe this is where GFAN can truly distinguish itself and where country and regional leadership must remain at the center of its global efforts. A decentralized and collaborative approach to knowledge is not just about sharing information. It's about shifting when knowledge is generated and who leads it. And GFAN is very well positioned to do so. The most relevant, timely, and credible expertise comes from those closest to the issues, regional networks, national advocates, and community leaders. And we will see over the next few years that GFAN will continue to invest in and elevate this leadership so that regional and country actors are not just contributors, but agenda setters. This means supporting locally driven analysis, amplifying country evidence in global spaces, and ensuring that advocacy positions are informed from the ground up and leaving no one behind. More importantly, we must ensure that this knowledge remains accessible and actionable so that all advocates, regardless of where they are, can engage meaningfully and confidently. On advocacy, this is where transformation lies. GFAN has already proven its strength in donor advocacy, but the future demands so much more. I'm excited by the intention to expand into areas like domestic resource mobilization, debt for health, debt swaps, and tax justice. These are not just technical areas, they are deeply political and increasingly central to sustainable health financing. So we hope, and I hope personally, that GFAN continues to evolve its advocacy to match this complexity, bringing in new expertise, building new alliances, and ensuring that our messaging remains bold, relevant, and solutions-oriented. Because ultimately, advocacy is not just about raising funds, it's about reshaping systems so that health equity becomes a reality. GFAN is especially relevant at this moment because the Asia-Pacific region is experiencing accelerated transitions in global fund support, with countries moving towards reduced external financing and greater domestic responsibility. These shifts are not just financial, they are structural, political, and deeply consequential for communities. GFAN as a whole plays a critical role in ensuring that this transition is equitable and accountable by amplifying country and community voices at the very moment they risk being sidelined. It helps bridge the gap between global decisions and national realities, ensuring that issues like sustainability, service continuity, and protection of key populations remain front and center. In a time of rapid change, GFAN, together with partners and all of us, can provide the coordination, evidence, and advocacy needed to prevent gains from being reversed and to push for transition pathways that are just, inclusive, and grounded in the lived experience of those most affected. So in closing, I believe GFAN stands at an important moment. The challenges in global health are growing, but so is our capacity to respond. If we stay connected, informed, and ambitious. GFAN means collective strength. Our journey shows what's possible. So more now than ever, our future depends on how well we translate unity, expertise, and advocacy into action as one world, one fund. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you, Rachel. I really love how you were able to work in the taglines from the last replenishment campaigning into what you said, because it's always helpful to see yourself reflected in others and to see the kinds of value that our regional partners have brought to the work that we do collectively, that hopefully we've brought to the work that they do and that we will continue to do as we work forward from this, and that we make sure that the information remains accessible to all, and that we're actively seeking out more information and more expertise from colleagues who don't always get automatic spaces, I guess, within discussions and decision-making processes. So thank you, Rachel. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to continuing to work with you, as we have for a very long time. So I'm going to pass it now on to Priscilla Maado, who's an advocate from Ghana. She is also newly the alternate board member for the Global Fund Communities Delegation. She also has, for the last few years, been working with us closely at GFAN within our Speakers Bureau, and was the youngest of our speakers in the last cohort. And we're looking forward to some reflections from her around that work and youth engagement and how our strategy will guide us. And I believe I'm told there's a blog that's coming soon, but we wanted to invite you, Priscilla. You've been on many different stages and in many different spaces for discussion, including, standing beside Germany as they made their announcement for their pledge to the Global Fund last fall for the 8th replenishment. And we just wanted to invite you to stand, as you have before, stand with us today and give us some of your reflections around our new strategy, youth engagement in particular, but also everything else that GFAN means to you and the work that you do in your day-to-day work. So Priscilla, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. I would say GFAN is a very remarkable entity or a very remarkable community. I joined GFAN in 2023. And since then, it has been an incredible space to really learn and connect with advocates from across the globe. I think one unique thing about GFAN is the diversity. Particularly not only of civil society, but also of communities, right? People who serve communities and people who come from different communities. I think that diversity is what really amazes me about this community. And I feel like there's none other that I have experienced. And I really appreciate that opportunity to be part of this community. Over the years, I have been part of a lot of GFAN campaigns, from in-person campaigns and digital campaigns as well. I remember that was my first replenishment where the torch was being passed, a very incredible memory for me because I saw the creativity of advocacy, right? Where advocacy transcends borders. And to me that would always be a mark for me, and also for how I do advocacy in my work. I think GFAN really plays a unique role, a very central role, especially when it comes to the three diseases. And I feel like, or I believe that the reason why communities, the essence of communities and civil societies has not been lost yet is because of the existence of GFAN and its partners. So it's very crucial that we continue to maintain the sanctity of it, the core principles of GFAN, what GFAN stands for, the values, right? That it was created with, and that even if when times are changing and when priorities are shifting, those values still remain key. That the people at the center of the response must not be relegated to the background. I think also over the years, this partnership has been instrumental, particularly in the role we play in the global health system. I think GFAN transcends the three diseases, if I'm being very honest with the work we do. Because even when you look at other partnerships or other collaborations, like even in digital health, you can see some components of GFAN, some influence as well. If you also look at Unit Aid and all other partnerships. So I feel like we really transcend the three diseases. And if I would recommend one thing, I think we should not cage ourselves to the three diseases. Of course, they should be our key priorities, but the work we do does transcend, especially into global health architecture and global health priorities in the broader view of things. I do want to really appreciate the Speakers Bureau, a very critical component to have youth voices, to flourish youth voices, to strengthen youth voices, to also to ensure that youth voices have the space and the tools and the resources they need to be part of something bigger than themselves. And so I do hope that in the future, this Speakers Bureau is strengthened and we do not leave behind young, diverse voices. So this is my big thank you to you all, and really appreciating the work of every single one of you. And I am hopeful for the future, despite everything that's happening. I try not to be pessimistic, but I am hopeful that GFAN would continue being strong and its presence being very, very visible. Thank you, and over.
Thank you, Priscilla. I really appreciate your reflections and just really appreciate the opportunities we've had over the last few years to get to know you and to support your incredible engagements as a speaker, but also just as an advocate in the global spaces in which we sometimes run across each other. I always love when I randomly run into someone I didn't know was going to be at a conference or a meeting or at a different conversation and get an opportunity to connect and catch up. So thank you, Priscilla. We really appreciate you and the work that you've done and all of our speakers. I did want to take a moment now to pass it on to Anthony Yin from CHAI, who manages currently their malaria initiatives in Lusophone and Anglophone Africa, if I'm getting it correctly. And Anthony's a returning GFANer. He had been a part of the network back in about 2018, took a little bit of a break. Like to know more about that, and is now what we say back in the fold. And we asked Anthony to come today because we wanted to sort of hear some reflections from someone who's been in the space, about how the space has changed, and how they see the new strategy emerging and meeting sort of some of the challenges of today. So Anthony, I'm told you have your own presentation, which is very exciting for me. And so Anthony, very much welcome, and I'll pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. Can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes, we can hear you and see your screen. Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Anthony Ewan. I'm with the Clinton Health Access Initiative, or CHAI. I'm very excited to talk about what GFAN has meant for my team's work. We work with ministries of health across Africa and Asia to develop evidence-based national malaria strategic plans, secure and align financing for those plans, and conduct data-driven prioritization for the limited resources that we have, right? Just as some quick background, the countries that we support, they all have really ambitious malaria plans, and it sort of reflects the full scope of what they would like to achieve. But the reality is that the money is never enough. And so the challenge is really figuring out how do you extract as much burden reduction potential for every dollar that they spend. Now, I think, in normal years, that's a difficult question. I'd say in this, with everything that's happened since the beginning of 2025, it's taken on a new level of importance, given the dramatic shifts in the funding landscape. And one of the key things that was really challenging as we were going into this GCA start is that, if you don't know what your funding constraint is, it's practically impossible to prioritize effectively. And so, with all the uncertainty last year, my team spent a lot of time trying to think through what the different replenishment scenarios might mean for the countries that we support. And GFAN's work, particularly on the sort of their outlook model and the discussions, were really critical for helping us understand what might be plausible from these different donors, whether the U.S. might pledge this much or this much, what are we hearing from governments, from news. That helped us sort of take a global funding projection and allowed us to extrapolate what that might mean for the countries that my team supports. And so, GFAN's mission has been really valuable for my team's work there, by bringing together the advocates, the experts, and different stakeholders across the global health community to share some of the valuable context and actionable information that we've used to directly inform strategic planning, financing, and resource optimization for malaria. Because once we get a sense of roughly which way the wind is blowing, that then helps us think about what is possible in the countries that we support, or that my team supports, right? So if you know roughly what your funding constraint is, that really matters because you can do different things with that pot of funds. If, for example, if you had $100 million, you might be looking at expanding your BedNet campaign. But if you only have half of that, that's a different decision that you're going to have to be thinking about. You might be thinking about, where can I sacrifice universal coverage to make sure that the people who are the most risk of morbidity and mortality from malaria get covered by those BedNets. If you have $20 million, that's an entirely different question. You're probably abandoning the idea of a campaign and thinking about what you can do with non-campaign options, right? So the discussions as we were leading up to the end of the replenishment really helped us get a sense of what kind of ballpark we might be in. And even though we don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, and there were certainly some pleasant and maybe less pleasant surprises from the replenishment, that process, these discussions and the information and what was shared through the GFAN forum really helped us sensitize the ministries of health for what might be coming, prepare for contingencies, think about what their options might be, and really do some evidence-based analysis for how do you make those hard decisions, right? So if you have to sacrifice your nets, we can help you gather some data and do retrospective, prospective analysis so that when you're forced to make that decision, you're going in with the sort of best, most informed decision you can make, because the timelines for GCA are incredibly tight. I mean, they're always, especially for the window one countries, for GC7 and GC6 that I've sort of supported, they're always tight, but GC8 is really, really tight. And so, as I said, the GFAN provide a lot of that insight ahead of time, and allowed us to get ahead of at least which way things might be looking. And that gave us a rough sense before the allocation decisions were announced, before the replenishments were announced, sort of to make the most use of the time that we had to plan and prioritize which intervention should go where, which decisions does my national malaria program have to think about, and so that we can have those sort of sensitization discussions with national malaria programs and ministries of. So just to wrap up, I'll say that looking forward, I'm really excited to see the strategy that GFAN has taken up. And I know after the bulk of the grants are signed that there'll certainly be a need to reflect on GC8 so far and what that might mean for the future of Global Fund. And GFAN provides this wonderful forum of advocates, country representatives, technical experts, and different stakeholders that help us build like a fuller picture of the opportunities and challenges that face the partnership, and hopefully in a united voice advocate for the changes to be taken up by Global Fund, by governments, and by the community, so that we can together shape a future that brings us closer to our shared goals of saving lives and strengthening health programs. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak. That's it from me.
Anthony, thank you so much. It's really interesting and really encouraging to hear some of the ways in which you felt like the ways that we share information and the platforms that we provide helped you and your team in terms of giving you as much planning time and making the best use of it with as much knowledge as you could gather from various sources, including GFAN. So thank you so much for sharing those reflections. It's really appreciated. I hope you fill out our annual surveys. Let me just put it that way. And continue to participate, because it's always really helpful to know how you as our members utilize the information and what kinds of information you find most useful. So thank you for that. So we have one more colleague from our membership that's going to speak to us today, and then we will open it up for any other sort of discussion or questions. But I did just want to quickly introduce Annika Anudari, who works with Youth Lead and is a youth advocate, newer to GFAN as well, and wants to reflect that perspective here today with all of you. We first sort of crossed paths as we were doing work around debt to health, I think it was, and has actively supported our German partners, for example, in some of their advocacy efforts in this area. But Annika, you're very welcome. It's lovely to see you again. It has been a little while since I've seen you, but welcome, and look forward to your thoughts and reflections. Over to you.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Katie, and congratulations to everyone involved in developing the GFAN new strategy. And my engagement with GFAN is less than a year, and as someone still familiarizing with this amazing spiritually young network, I'm happy to share what impacts this community meant to me and our organization, Youth Lead Mongolia. So we are a community-based organization ensuring young people's voices are heard in decision-making around HIV, health, and human rights. Much of our work is community-based, supporting young people and key population and advocating for services that are responsive to their realities. And when I first became involved with GFAN, my perspective was largely focused on what was happening at the community and national levels. And through GFAN, I feel like I gained much deeper understanding of how global advocacy and donor commitments and global fund processes directly influence what becomes possible for communities on the ground. And what has been most valuable is seeing how community voices can move beyond consultation and become part of decision making itself. So in Mongolia, as grant cycle is being developed, our organization organized a community dialogue that progressed into country dialogue processes and ultimately into working groups supporting proposal development. And we were just not asked for feedback, and we are actually helping to shape the priority in our country. And I'm happy to see such developments for community members to have psychosocial support for key population and human rights sensitive services, and more comprehensive approaches to HIV prevention and care, which became part of the discussion and proposal development process. And I feel like this reflects the first pillar of the new strategy at GFAN, which is the unity, and where it's creating spaces for civil society communities, advocates, such as myself and partners can come together to speak and also to influence furtherly. And the second pillar, expertise, I feel like is also resonating strongly. One lesson I've learned is that these expertise don't only come from institutions or technical agencies, and it feels truly empowering and validating to hear GFAN standing by to prioritize community voices and expertise, which is kind of helping us to bully our way in to be heard. And community-based organizations understand the barriers people face when accessing services, are usually the first contact space for people to seek support and address stigma they encounter and the support systems they need to remain engaged in care. And I'm thrilled to see Network collectively working ensure that this lived expertise is recognized and translated into evidence and ultimately brought into policy discussions. And lastly, I'm inspired by the strategy focused on the advocacy. As we all are aware, we are entering a period of global health financing faces significant challenges and uncertainty. In my humble opinion, through advocacy, not just secure resources, but also about to protect meaningful participation, not to lose the years of work, data, community support they have gathered, and ensuring that the communities continue to have a voice in shaping the future global health response. So GC8 is prospected to be a gargantuan and critical space for us, for Youth Mongolia and other community-based organizations, our government, and myself. And I hope to be engaged with GFAN over the next years to learn more and hopefully to see GFAN continues to invest in community leadership, particularly in youth leadership, continue to strengthen opportunities for meaningful engagement, and continues to demonstrate most effective solutions emerge when communities are treated not only as beneficiaries, but us as partners and leaders. Thank you for welcoming me into this network over the past year. I look forward to continue this journey together and to contribute the important work ahead of all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you and to learn from you as you've, joined some of our meetings and sat on panels for us when we've been having different conversations. So thank you very much for sharing those reflections. I think it's always good to hear the ways, like I said to Anthony, it's always good to hear the ways in which, the work that we do together or the work that we do contributes to the work and how you do it in terms of either the information or the contacts that you make through GFAN, or the understanding that you develop of, different areas that relate to the work that you do, like you were saying around global fund policy decisions and how they affect that core of your work at the national level. So thank you very much for those reflections. There's a few colleagues who have been entering some comments in the chat, which everybody is welcome to do. I think we are at the point where we could just open it up for any discussion or any other sort of questions. Everybody said some very nice things, and that's really always welcome. But also, if you have any points that you would like to interrogate about our new strategy, or clarifications that you would like about ways in which we have been doing our work, and if we plan to expand or change in different ways. So I'm going to see if my colleagues might be able to put back up online for all of us to view while we close out this call, the slide that has the strategy pillars. See if we can pull that up for you all. But opening it up to you if you have any questions or any points that you wanted to raise before we end the call. So please use the raise hand function if you can find it. Otherwise, just let us know in the chat that you'd like to speak. But just looking for any colleagues who might have anything to say. And again, your nice comments are very welcome, but also really do welcome any interrogation or any questions about the strategy or ways in which you would hope to see different work. I'm just trying to find, there we go. I'm not seeing any hands raised yet. So I'm assuming I might be able to call on any one of you to similarly share some of the ways in which GFAN has been work that has worked for you. So I see Rafa's hand raised and Julius. So I'm going to go to Rafa first and then Julius. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, everyone. It has so far been a very inspiring session and very energizing. So very much looking forward to this new phase of the strategy. And in the spirit, like you said, of asking questions, one of the things that comes to mind as well is the need to shift the narrative. And I think very much about like the time where the Global Fund was created. I was young back then, but now when I know the story and what it means for the world, I think that we were a very critical time, and crisis turned into opportunity, especially because of the advocacy of advocates who were brave to ask for something like the Global Fund. So I'm wondering also, what are your plans around the narrative? I think we're also facing a crisis, and it is again, there's also again a very important role for advocates to shift a new narrative that makes us again connected across borders, and that really makes the case for investing in health. So I wonder if that's something that is in here in the strategy, especially also if we think that there will be another replenishment cycle soon. So wondering what are the thoughts on that issue?
Thanks, Rafa. I really appreciate that question. I'll let Julius come in and introduce themselves and ask their question, and then I'll come back to that. But I appreciate the question. Julius.
Okay, Kathy, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Julius Memory. I work with Engineer, and I would like us to congratulate you all for the nice work you have done putting together with the ideas to come up with this substantive document. We really appreciate you for the nice work. But I just have one question from the strategy. I see you have put together all of that's required to get the money to global fund, but I think you know that in the global fund strategy for 2028, among of the focus areas around the area of sustainability, transition, and co-financing. And it argument that it also produced the sustainability, transition, and co-financing policy 2024 to ensure that create an environment for countries that are graduating from the global fund financing prepare to finance their own healthcare system, especially around the area of HIV, TB, and malaria. But looking at this strategy, I didn't see an area we as GFAN advocates can take part, especially for some of us who are coming from the implementing countries, in a way that can play parts to ensure that we continue also putting an input in our countries to allocate more resources, domestic resources for especially for financing the HIV, TB, and malaria, so that they can start preparing creating a pathway for transition when that uh, uh, when that happens in your country. So my question was, how can we give an advocate put that also in our plan as we move forward? Because it is that mentioned in that new strategy that we're trying to implement from 2026 2030. Thank you.
Thanks, Julius. I think I got most of your questions, so I would invite you to place any sort of key parts of your question in the chat as well to make sure that I can address it. But I think I got the sort of general gist of your question, so apologies if I missed it. But I'll give you a second if you're able to put some of that into the chat. But Rafa, I think to come back to sort of the narrative, I mean, I would like to think that you know, we have been a part at different times of trying to help shift the narrative that we talk about within the Global Fund context specifically. You know, we have at different times tried to, shift from, in the early days of GFAN anyways, we focused a lot on, telling the positive story about the Global Fund and its investments, which was an important, thing in the way that we did that. And that has evolved over the years as we've tried to, meet the challenges of, increasing gaps in terms of funding from what's needed to what's available. That gap has continued to widen and compound, and the impacts of it have continued to compound. But we've shifted that to a place where now we talk more about not the stories per se. I mean, the stories are important, right? And we want to hear those, but we also want to hear the expertise, right? When we're talking about, I think what Julius was, getting to in his question, when we're talking about issues of transition, of sustainability, of co-financing, we need to hear about what is and isn't working in the different tools, in the different ways in which, Global Fund, grants are operating at the domestic level and the subnational sort of level. We need to hear those at the global level, because, just as Annika said, where, she felt like they felt like receipt, the information that, was learned and gleaned and through GFAN was able to influence their work at the country level. We also have to make sure that the country level work is influencing the ways and the approaches that we take at the global level. So really making sure that that narrative is built in that kind of co-creative, both sort of directions, and really meet sort of the moment for now. Like, I think one of the things we talked about in the last replenishment campaign was around how do we talk to these sort of more right-leaning or right-wing governments. So we're going to continue to kind of try and do some of that and hopefully continue to help shape that narrative. But I know that we're going to be looking to people like yourself and others who are sort of doing that thinking, doing that analysis, and seeing sort of how that develops, as the conversations around reform and change continue within the global health space. But Julie, I think just to quickly add again, just to say, that I think financing was an area in particular where we had a very focused approach to sort of donor resource mobilization, and domestic resource mobilization was something that we were becoming more aware of, and we were, incorporating the views and perspectives and asks of our partners in Africa and Asia through our regional partners work. But I think now with the move towards transition, and other sort of pressures on the global fund system as a whole, I think we are sort of looking more at sort of the broader financing picture. So not just donor resource mobilization and campaigning and advocacy for the global fund, but for the broader system that supports, the financing of the global fund, of other GHIs, of countries, and of NGOs, civil society, and within those community-led groups. What are some of the things that need to change on the big global level in terms of the structure of global health financing, but then also at the domestic level in terms of how different groups access and lead work through with the appropriate levels of funding that are needed to do that. So all of that, I think, is a part of sort of the sustainability, the transition, and the co-financing conversation at the Global Fund. And we're still developing that, but that's definitely a part of our sort of our work plan that feels a little bit new with this strategy, in a way that we were a little bit more removed, I think, from those broader conversations. So you should start to see a little bit more from us, and more asks from us to all of you to bring the expertise from those spaces that you are focused on, that you are working in around social contracting, around other sources of financing like the World Bank, around tax policies and those kinds of things. So I think you'll begin to see a little bit more of that from us, and you'll also begin to hear from us about looking for you colleagues who are sort of the experts in those spaces. We have, I think a little bit maybe predictably already gone a little over time, but there's still a number of you who've been able to stay on with us. And I would just ask if there's any other sort of final questions or any discussion points, and ask my colleagues to put up the final slide so that I can close out our call. But first, just looking to see if there is anything final from a colleague. Okay, I'm not actually seeing any hands raised, but obviously we have a call tomorrow. In our usual, bi-weekly period, we do tend to take a little bit of a break sort of over parts of July and August, but I think you can expect to see us both tomorrow on our GFAN call around reflections from the World Health Assembly around Africa Forward and G7 processes, which are very timely. And you can expect a regular number of calls between now and sort of the end of July, maybe a little bit of break in August, and you'll see us again in September. And just wanted to highlight for all of you that we will, as we sort of have been doing for a number of years now, we have sort of a 3-year cycle to our GFAN Speakers Bureau, and those nominations are going to be opening soon. So thinking about colleagues with that kind of community expertise of the work that the Global Fund does and that sort of lived experience of the impact of the Global Fund. We're looking for those colleagues. So thinking about some colleagues that you may want to share that nomination process with, that you may want to nominate and support. All speakers need a member who has been around for, I forget, 6 months or a year to nominate and support their nomination. And we'll be looking to convene that new group of speakers later this year and provide some training and induction for those colleagues. So you'll be seeing information about that coming up. Our GFAN call tomorrow. There's also an exceptional call, another one next week around innovation in the HIV and TB response that will also have Global Fund Secretariat colleagues joining us. So lots to do, lots to talk about. We feel really thankful that we are done the strategy development part of the last few years, and we're getting into the strategy implementation, operationalization, and you'll continue to see us and our team sort of show up in these spaces, provide these spaces, support these spaces, but also hopefully you'll start to see a little bit more from us in some of those areas that we talked about today. So thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you all very much for your partnership, your support, and your sharing of your expertise within GFAN. We are as strong as we are because of all of you and because of the approach that you take to being a part of this network. So thank you, everyone. I'm really excited about the next few years and the work that we're going to be doing together through our strategy in these interesting times. Have a very good rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye bye, everyone.